My newly hired coworker is the owner's daughter and thinks I'm not pretty enough to deserve the help I receive at work. I'm handicapped and missing both my legs. Posted by you/Park Downtown 3937. Throwaway because my brother thinks I'm the jerk here, and I don't need him chiming in. I'm not asking if I am. I, 25F, work in an office. The front of the office is for client parking only, so it doesn't get overcrowded. The back of the office has our employee parking. The front has 3 handicap parking spots, but the back has none. Technically, it meets whatever requirements it has too. I lost both of my legs from the knees down in a terrible accident as a teen. I had to relearn how to walk, deal with constant pain, and can't go long distances. Carrying anything heavy is also a big challenge. I've made it work with my prosthetics and occasionally use a wheelchair if my stumps really ache. That said, I never wear skirts or shorts. I don't like the stares, the questions, or the unsolicited advice. When I started working at my job, I asked if I would be parking out front, but my office instead gave me a reserved parking spot next to the back door. They even hung a little sign marking it as reserved. After working there for a while, I suggested to management that they add a handicap spot or 2 in the back, but they declined, saying there wasn't a need for it because I had my reserved spot. I figured they would reserve another spot for anyone else who needed it, just like they had a temporary reservation area for any pregnant coworkers. Last week was rough. One of my legs had splintered, it's the best word I have to describe it, after a bit of a fumble on my part. So I had no choice but to use the wheelchair until I could get my replacement. Since I dislike being legless, it makes me very self-conscious. I still wore my prosthetics. I pulled into the back parking lot to see my spot taken by a pretty little car. I'm a sucker for green. The front parking was also full, so all that was left was the parking in the way back. Instead, I just turned around, pulled into the front client parking area, parked, hung up my placard, and went inside. I immediately found my boss and explained about my leg, the parking situation, and what I had done. He wasn't pleased that someone had taken my spot and told me to just get to work while he looked into it. Around lunchtime, he found me and explained that it was the owner's kid. She had just started working here and didn't know about the parking. He said she wouldn't be parked there again tomorrow. Cool, just a newbie and a mix-up. The next day rolls around, and that pretty little car is back where it doesn't belong. I do the same thing as the day before, and my boss looks frustrated. He heads off to have a chat. At some point, my boss comes back to me with a stack of paperwork. He tells me that the new girl is kicking up a fuss about the parking spot and trying to threaten him because, you know who my dad is, right? So he's done with it. Instead of taking it up the ladder and fighting against her to get the boss man to see reason, he's submitting paperwork to HR about the lack of handicap parking in the back. Since I started working here, HR and our accessibility department have changed hands, and he knows there are a few people there who are very accommodating. I filled out the paperwork, and he took it from there. For the rest of the week, I had to park in the front, and everyone was getting annoyed with it for one reason or another, either complaining about special treatment for me or getting angry at the new girl for kicking out someone who actually needed the parking spot. A lot of people started giving her the cold shoulder, and she couldn't understand why. More people have been checking on me and offering to help carry things. She saw this and decided that I'm not pretty enough for that kind of attention and that I'm unprofessional. This morning, I checked the back again, and her little car was parked all the way in the back. In my old reserved spot, there's now a bright and shiny handicap sign. I rolled in to hear her loudly complaining to the front-end staff, demanding they set a time for her to meet with her daddy today because she can't be bothered to walk across a parking lot on perfectly healthy legs, judging by her skirt and heels. I would trade our legs in an instant so she could keep the damn parking spot. Sorry, I guess I needed to vent a little. And I'm worried about what she might say to her daddy and how it will affect me. Relevant comments. Commenter. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't businesses required to have at least one handicapped spot? Anyways, screw your brother for saying you're the jerk. If anyone is, it's the owner's kid and your brother. Commenter 2. The last time I checked, you needed one handicap accessible spot for every 25 parking spots. So if you have 100 spots, 4 must be handicap accessible. If you have 76 spots, 4 must be handicap accessible. Update 1 day later. I appreciated the kind words about my annoying little rant yesterday. My brother can be pretty hard to deal with, as he has a very difficult time understanding others. Maybe he didn't get enough hugs as a kid, who knows? I know not a lot of people are looking for an update, but it felt nice to have a few people on my side. That said, nothing really happened yesterday. It wasn't until I was home from work that things started to pick up. My boss called after hours. He never does this, and strongly suggested that I wear a skirt to work tomorrow and then leave early for an appointment, with time off that he had approved. When pressed, he said he really couldn't go into details because my reactions would reveal too much. I asked if there was any way to get out of wearing the skirt, and he suggested bringing a blanket to drape over my legs. My boss has never asked me for anything like this before, but I had the feeling it was to drive home a point. So, against my own feelings, I wore the skirt and went into work today. I placed the blanket over my legs in my office and worked until I was called in for a surprise meeting with my boss, the owner, and HR. My boss gave me a pointed look at my legs before we entered the meeting, so I put the blanket on the back of my wheelchair. The owner looked absolutely annoyed to be there, borderline angry, and stood up to say something but seemed to freeze. I could hear his teeth click as he shut his mouth. He went to stare out the window while we, HR, my boss, and I discussed his daughter's actions and words. Apparently, a few people had submitted complaints about her on my behalf. The owner asked only one question the entire time: "How long have you been? Well, when did you lose your legs?" I answered and offered proof, but my boss said it was already on file for my accommodations and could be checked there. The owner stormed out after that. HR thanked me for my time and sent me back to my office. By noon, I was leaving, and the owner's daughter was packing up her space, crying while her father stood over her with the darkest expression I had ever seen on him. He frustrates easily but hardly ever yells. I can count on one hand how many times he has. He was shouting at her the entire time she packed. I just rolled by as quietly as I could because I didn't want to get sucked in. My boss texted me that the owner had approved me to work from home as needed and that I would be getting a pay raise outside of the usual annual raise and bonuses. He also said that the owner would be making his daughter apologize. This turned out better than I had thought it would. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Relevant comments. Commenter. I couldn't understand why the daughter still kicked up a fuss when Op showed up in a wheelchair. Did the entitled brat think that Op just had a wheelchair sitting around because she spent her free time panhandling? And how did Op get a handicap placard? Apparently, the brat thought Op was faking it until she proved she'd lost her legs. I hope the brat finally learned a lesson. Commenter 2. She's probably one of those people who believes that if a wheelchair user is ever capable of walking, they don't actually need the wheelchair and aren't really disabled. Commenter 3. I mean, he probably believed whatever his little angel was telling him at first. Judging by his asking how long it had been since Op lost their legs, she probably spun a tale about someone taking advantage of her or bullying her because she's new or some nonsense. He even put his neck on the line a bit with that meeting. Once he realized how close he was to making a serious mistake because his daughter was a spoiled brat, he handled it. Maybe a little overboard since he was yelling in the office, but that could very well be the first tough parenting she's ever received. Honestly, massive win for Op to have coworkers supporting and standing up for her, even against the big boss's daughter.